Man has flourished in nature, and nature has gifted man with diverse life forms. It is astonishing and fascinating for man to share this planet with enormous variety of living forms. But this biological wealth of our planet has been declining rapidly, and the accusing finger is clearly pointing towards human activities. Although these activities are carried out in the name of development, but we need to ponder on one thing. Can we afford development at the cost of our biodiversity? We see that around 0.2 to 0.6% of species are being lost every year. This rate is at least 10,000 times greater than the past natural rate of species extinction. That is why there is a vital need to conserve our biodiversity.
ਹੈਲੋ ਸਟੂਡੈਂਟਸ, ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਪਾਠ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਪਾਠ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕਰਨ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਪਾਠ ਦੇ ਲਰਨਿੰਗ ਆਬਜੈਕਟਿਵਸ ਸ਼ੇਅਰ ਕਰ ਲਵਾਂ।
On completion of this topic, learners will be able to define biodiversity conservation, describe in-situ and ex-situ conservation strategies, define national park, sanctuary, and biosphere reserve. List out the national and international societies engaged in biodiversity conservation.
ਵਰਤਮਾਨ ਸਮੇਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਾਇਓਡਾਇਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਸ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੀ ਸਵਰਗ ਵਰਗੀ ਧਰਤੀ ਦੀ ਬਾਇਓਡਾਇਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਬੜੀ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ। ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਸ਼ਨ ਐਫਰਟਸ ਬਾਰੇ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕਰਨ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਆਓ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਕਨਸੈਪਟ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝ ਲਈਏ। ਸੋ ਲੈਟ ਅਸ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਬਾਇਓਡਾਇਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਸ਼ਨ। The protection, reproduction, preservation, restoration, and management of natural environment and the ecological communities in their natural habitat is known as biodiversity conservation. ਕੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹੋ ਕਿ ਭਾਰਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਭਾਰਤ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਬਾਇਓਡਾਇਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਸ਼ਨ ਵੱਲ ਧਿਆਨ ਦੇ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। Indian government constituted an Indian Board for Wildlife in year 1952. The main functions of this board are to sponsor the setting up of national parks, sanctuaries, botanical and zoological gardens, to formulate the policies and planning for protection of wildlife, to promote public interest in wildlife. After the constitution of Indian Board for Wildlife, Government of India declared the Wildlife Week in year 1955. Since then, it is celebrated in the first week of October. It is basically to create awareness and educate the people regarding the importance and need of conservation of wildlife. In 1972, our government took a very big step in the field of conservation of biodiversity. Our government constituted a Wildlife Protection Act in 1972. This act was enforced in all states of India. This act states, hunting and trade of wild animals and their allied products should be regulated. Trade of rare and endangered species should be banned. National parks and sanctuaries should be created. ਇਹ ਐਕਟ ਜੰਮੂ ਕਸ਼ਮੀਰ ਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਨੇ ਅਡਾਪਟ ਕਰ ਲਿਆ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਸ ਸਟੇਟ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਹੀ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਐਕਟ ਲਾਗੂ ਸਨ। ਆਓ ਇਸ ਵਾਈਲਡ ਲਾਈਫ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਐਕਟ 1972 ਬਾਰੇ ਹੋਰ ਜਾਣੀਏ।
Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Government of India enacted a comprehensive legislation, Wildlife Protection Act 1972, with the objective of effective control of poaching and illegal trade of wildlife. For offences relating to wild animals, the punishment and penalty is enhanced. The minimum imprisonment prescribed is 3 years, which may extend up to 7 years, with a minimum fine of Rs 10,000. For a subsequent offence of this nature, the term of imprisonment shall not be less than 3 years, but may extend to 7 years, with a minimum fine of Rs 25,000.
Now I hope you are familiar with Wildlife Protection Act 1972. But do you know, this act had several flaws. This act was practically not fit to conserve biodiversity. So it required modifications to fulfill all the objectives of conservation. Later on, the Government of India constituted the National Wildlife Action Plan, which was introduced in the year 1983-84. It focuses towards the rehabilitation of endangered species by captive breeding. This plan basically concentrated on the reproduction and restoration of all species in their natural habitats. For the protection and preservation of the natural ecosystem, government gave a new concept of national parks, sanctuaries and biosphere reserves. So, national parks and biosphere reserves came into existence in year 1986. Do you know what a national park is? Okay, let us define the national park. National parks. A national park is an area which is strictly reserved for the betterment of the wildlife, and activities like forestry, grazing or cultivation are not permitted there. In these parks, even private ownership rights are not allowed. ਜਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਪਾਰਕ ਅੰਡਰਡਿਵੈਲਪਡ ਲੈਂਡ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਰਿਜ਼ਰਵ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਅਕਸਰ ਸੈਂਟਰਲ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਦੇ ਅੰਡਰ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ। ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾਤਰ ਇਸ ਲੈਂਡ ਨੂੰ ਇਕੋਲੋਜੀ ਦੀ ਰੈਸਟੋਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਲਈ ਯੂਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ। There are few characteristics of the national parks, such as national parks are reserved for betterment of the entire wildlife. Boundaries of national parks are limited and identified. Human activities such as forestry, grazing or cultivation are not permitted. ਬੱਚਿਓ, ਭਾਰਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਪਾਰਕ ਜਿਮ ਕਾਰਬੇਟ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਪਾਰਕ ਸੀ। ਹੁਣ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਪਾਰਕਸ ਨਾਲ ਚੰਗੀ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਫੈਮਿਲੀਅਰ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਹੋ। आओ हुण सैंक्चुरीज बारे डिस्कस करिए। Sanctuary. A sanctuary is a place where animals live and are protected. It is a sheltered place for animals and birds where they are safe to roam about freely. Sanctuaries are reserved for betterment of animals only. Plant life is not covered under sanctuaries. Its boundaries are not limited and are unidentified. Here, human activities such as forestry, grazing and cultivation are permitted. ਜਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਸੈਂਚੁਰੀ ਉਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਕਟਡ ਏਰੀਆ ਹੈ ਜੋ ਐਨੀਮਲਸ ਅਤੇ ਬਰਡਸ ਦੇ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਸ਼ਨ ਲਈ ਰਿਜ਼ਰਵ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇੱਥੇ ਕੁਝ ਹਿਊਮਨ ਐਕਟੀਵਿਟੀਜ਼ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਹਾਰਵੈਸਟਿੰਗ ਆਫ ਟਿੰਬਰ, ਕਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਆਫ ਮਾਈਨਰ ਫੋਰੈਸਟ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਕਟਸ ਅਤੇ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਵੇਟ ਓਨਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਅਲਾਉਡ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਪਰ ਸੈਂਚੁਰੀ ਏਰੀਆ ਦੇ ਰਿਸੋਰਸਸ ਨੂੰ ਯੂਟਿਲਾਈਜ਼ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਪਰਮਿਸ਼ਨ ਕੇਵਲ ਵਿਲੇਜਰਸ ਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਮਰਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਐਕਸਪਲੋਇਟੇਸ਼ਨ strictly prohibited ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ। However, villagers are not allowed to interfere and cause hindrance in the life of animals. Sanctuaries ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਹੁਣ Biosphere Reserves ਬਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਦੇ ਹਾਂ। The concept of Biosphere Reserves was launched under Man and Biosphere, that is MAB program in the year 1975. Under this program, UNESCO established several biosphere reserves throughout the world. This program is launched for dealing with the conservation of ecosystems and the genetic resources. In India, 14 biosphere reserves were identified. Biosphere reserves are created to promote a balanced relationship between humans and biosphere. It consists of combination of terrestrial, coastal or marine ecosystems. Before going ahead, we must know what a biosphere reserve is. A biosphere reserve is a specified area in which multiple use of the land is permitted by dividing it into certain zones, each zone being specified for a particular activity. ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਸਮਝ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਬਾਇਓਸਫੀਅਰ ਰਿਜ਼ਰਵ ਉਹ ਥਾਂ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਫੋਰੈਸਟ ਲੈਂਡ ਤੇ ਫਲੋਰਾ ਅਤੇ ਫੌਨਾ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨੈਚੁਰਲ ਫਾਰਮਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਪ੍ਰੀਜ਼ਰਵ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਸਰਾਊਂਡਿੰਗ ਏਰੀਆਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਿੰਗ ਫੋਰੈਸਟ ਐਂਡ ਫੋਰੈਸਟ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਕਟਸ ਲਈ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਐਂਡ ਐਕਸਪੈਰੀਮੈਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਯੂਟਿਲਾਈਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਦੀ ਪੈਰੀਫਰੀ ਨੂੰ ਐਗਰੀਕਲਚਰਲ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਲਈ ਵਰਤਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ। A biosphere reserve has several zones. Let us explore these zones.
Zones of a biosphere reserve. A biosphere reserve is basically divided into 3 zones. Core zone, which lies at the center, and here no human activity is permitted. It is legally protected. Surrounding the core area is the buffer zone that allows limited human activities. The outermost is manipulative zone, also known as transition zone. In this zone, multiple human activities are allowed, but without disturbing the ecology. Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve was the first biosphere reserve of India. It was established in year 1986.
Biosphere reserves have immense significance. The biosphere reserves were basically established to fulfill certain objectives. To conserve our biodiversity for the utilization of present and future generations. To conserve all the species within natural ecosystems. To safeguard the genetic diversity of species for reproduction. To provide areas for ecological and environmental research and training. We can say that the concept of biosphere reserves is of immense value for conserving the gene pool of flora and fauna in the country. It basically serves as benchmark for future studies. Do you know in our country some private societies like the Bombay Natural History Society and the Wildlife Preservation Society of India were established for the conservation of wildlife. Wildlife Preservation Society of India was established in year 1958 with its headquarters at Dehradun. While Bombay Natural History Society is a non-government body and was established in year 1983. Both private societies are dedicated towards the conservation of wildlife. There are several other bureaus working in the field of biodiversity conservation, such as National Bureau of Plant, Animal and Fish Genetic Resources. It has number of programs to collect and conserve gene of plants and animals in seed banks and gene banks and field gene banks for in vitro conservation. Government of India has also established various autonomous bodies which are working in the field of the conservation and protection of the biodiversity, such as Botanical Survey of India and Zoological Survey of India, working in the field of restoration of ecology. Now let us know about in situ conservation strategies.
In situ conservation means on-site conservation. Here, the plant or animal species are protected in its natural habitat. This is carried on by two methods. First one is species protect itself at their own habitat naturally. And the second one is species defend themselves from predators such as zebras, roam around in huge herds and protect themselves from the wild beasts. But both methods were not sufficient to remove the stress from ecosystem. So, it has been observed and realized to declare few areas as protected areas. These protected areas will be in the form of national parks, sanctuaries and biosphere reserves. These are also known as three modes of in situ conservation.
Now let us find out what ex situ conservation is. Ex situ conservation. Ex situ conservation includes establishment of botanical gardens, zoos, gene banks, pollen banks, seed banks, seedling banks, tissue culture and DNA banks, etc. These facilities not only provide housing and care for endangered species, but also have educational and recreation values for the society. Some examples of ex situ conservation are seed gene banks, field gene banks, cryopreservation, botanical gardens and zoological gardens. Let us explore them one by one. First, let us discuss about seed gene bank.
Seed gene banks are also known as germplasm banks. This is the easiest way to store the germplasm of plants at low temperature. The term seed bank also refers to cryogenic laboratory facility in which the seeds of some species can be kept viable for a long period. Germplasm can also be preserved by in vitro culturing, where culturing of plants is maintained under controlled conditions. Another method is field gene banks. It provides the genetic variability and also preserves the genes in the open spaces or in fields. By this method, genes can be preserved by field gene bank under normal growing conditions. Gene banks are used to store living sperms, eggs, and embryos. Next method of ex situ conservation is cryopreservation. This type of in vitro conservation is done at very low temperature, that is, minus 196 degrees Celsius in liquid nitrogen. This may be done with very rapid cooling, as in case of storing seeds. However, gradual cooling and simultaneous dehydration is carried out in tissue culture. Cryopreservation is highly successful in crops like potato. Another method of in-situ conservation is setting of botanical gardens. Botanical gardens provide protection to herbs, shrubs, and trees. In such gardens, more than 80,000 species are found. Many botanical gardens have the facilities of seed banks, tissue culture, and other latest in-situ technologies. Another method of in-situ conservation is zoo. It also provides protection for several species of vertebrates. Some zoos have also undertaken captive breeding programs.
United Nations play a key role in biodiversity conservation. It provides all basic facilities such as fund, policy guidelines, experts, etc. United Nations have formed several organizations such as UNDP or United Nations Development Programme, UNEP or United Nations Environment Programme, IUCN or International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, WWF or World Wildlife Fund, CITES or Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. But most of these organizations are working under the umbrella of United Nations. The funds required for conservation are generated by the World Bank. इसे कारण कई organizations the working United Nations they control under हुंदी है. Now let us discuss about the IUCN.
IUCN means International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. It was established in the year 1948. Its headquarters is located in Gland, near Geneva in Switzerland. The main objective of the IUCN is to conserve nature at any cost. IUCN is the scientific advisor to World Wildlife Fund. It helps the world community to find practical solutions to most critical environment and development challenges. It supports scientific research and field projects all over the world. It works with the help of governments, non-government organizations, companies, and local communities. IUCN is the world's oldest global environmental network.
Coming to WWF or World Wildlife Fund. WWF is engaged in protecting the future of nature. WWF is the largest multinational conservation organization in the world. It works in about 100 countries around the world.
World Wildlife Fund was established in the year 1961 at Gland in Switzerland, and the giant panda was chosen as its symbol. In India, World Wildlife Fund was established in year 1969 with its headquarters at Bombay. World Wildlife Fund or WWF undertook several projects like Project Tiger for the protection of tiger, while Project Elephant was started for the protection of elephants.
These are few widely campaigned projects that are supported by WWF. The major objectives of this organization are to protect natural areas and wild populations of plants and animals. Promote sustainable use of renewable natural resources. Promote optimum and efficient use of resources and energy. WWF is committed to protect our planet's natural environment and to build a future in which human needs are met in harmony with nature. I hope you are now well acquainted with WWF. Now let us move to another international program, that is United Nations Development Program, or in short UNDP.
UNDP works through a network in 166 countries. It works with its own programs according to their own unique national circumstances. UNDP advocates for the Millennium Development Goals, which are as follows: eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, achieve universal primary education, promote gender equality and empower women, reduce child mortality, improve maternal health, combat diseases like HIV, AIDS, malaria, etc., ensure environmental sustainability, and global partnership for development. There is one more international organization which works specifically in the field of environment, that is UNEP, or United Nations Environment Program. Most environment-related projects are duly funded by this organization. It is an international organization which works under the umbrella of United Nations. UNEP was established in the year 1972. The Secretariat of UNEP is situated in Nairobi in Kenya. It focuses the emerging environmental issues.
After the UNDP and UNEP, now let us move to CITES, or Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. Let us discuss more about it. CITES. CITES is an international agreement between governments. Its aim is to ensure restricted international trade of wild animals and plants. The CITES Secretariat is located at Geneva in Switzerland. CITES drafted a resolution in the year 1963, which is the largest convention regarding international trade in endangered species. I hope you are now familiar with efforts to conserve biodiversity. Let us recapitulate what we have learned so far. Conservation of biodiversity ਦੇ field ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੀ ਗਵਰਨਮੈਂਟ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਕੰਮ ਕੀਤੇ ਹਨ। ਨਾ ਸਿਰਫ laws constitute ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ ਬਲਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ powerful enforcement ਵੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ। Biodiversity ਦੇ conservation ਲਈ national parks, sanctuaries, biosphere reserves, zoological gardens, botanical gardens, etc. establish ਕੀਤੇ ਗਏ। ਦੂਜੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਨੇ ਕਈ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਜਿਵੇਂ UNDP, UNEP, IUCN, WWF ਫਾਰਮ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਹਨ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਖੇਤਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੇ ਅੰਦਰ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੀਆਂ ਹਨ। ਇਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੀ ਫੰਡਿੰਗ ਵਰਲਡ ਬੈਂਕ ਅਤੇ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਤੋਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ। Now here's a quick test for you to find out how much you have actually absorbed. The first question is, what does IUCN stand for? Answer: International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. Next question. What are the three modes of in-situ conservation? Answer: National parks, sanctuaries and biosphere reserves are the three modes of in-situ conservation. My next question is, what are the five modes of ex-situ conservation? Answer: The five modes of ex-situ conservation are seed gene bank, field gene bank, cryopreservation, botanical gardens and zoological gardens. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Thank you for your attention and see you next time. Till then, goodbye.